And ladies and gentlemen, we are back at the Food Exchange. Of course, with an event called the Food Exchange. I hope you just had a wonderful lunch hour and some wonderful food. Maybe you had some soup from the new Commons. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back at the Food Exchange. Of course, with an event called the Food Exchange. I hope you just had a wonderful lunch hour and some wonderful food. Maybe you had some soup from the new Commons. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back at the Food Exchange. Of course, with an event called the Food Exchange. I hope you just had a wonderful lunch hour and some wonderful food. Maybe you had some soup from the new Commons. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back at the Food Exchange.
I'm just going to interrupt to check that none of the speakers have two tabs open because I think we might be getting some feedback on that. Sorry about that, everyone.
So just to check with, only because I don't like hearing myself once, never mind 3 times. So Stephen and Ray, just to check, you've just got one hop-in tab open. So we'll keep going and check in. This has happened to us before on hop-in actually. But this session, I don't want to eat too much more into our time of this session because I know it's one that many of our attendees said they were particularly looking forward to tuning into, and it's completely focused on how to raise funds for your food and drink business. And I couldn't have 2 better people to help us kind of answer these questions. So Ray Ryan is helping businesses manage all things with their accounts, so how they manage money and prepare to raise that funding. And Stephen Twaddell is steeped in the food and drink sector. He ran Kellogg's in Europe for many years. He is now the chair of the food and drink element of the Halo Business Angels Network. He's an active angel investor himself and sits on the boards of a number of food and drink businesses. So welcome to you both, Ray and Stephen. Lovely to have you here.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having us along.
Lovely to see you both. Well, let's just start, Stephen, with yourself. If you're happy, just give our audience today a bit of a feel for your career, because it's been an incredible career in the food and drink sector, and sort of what brought you up to today, and then we'll get into kind of what you look for in your investments.
Oh, thanks, Emma. That's kind of you to say. In your introduction, you mentioned that I was with Kellogg's for a large part of my career. I was actually there for 26 years. I joined back in 1986 in Belfast as a sales rep, and literally my first job was selling cornflakes from my car. That's how it was done back in those days. I did a number of jobs for the company in sales and then into general management across a number of different geographies. I lived in Copenhagen and ran the Nordics business, ran the Russian business, the business in Middle East and Africa, and latterly then in Western Europe with Spain and Italy. 2005, Kellogg relocated its European office to Swords in County Dublin, which actually brought me back onto the island, which was fabulous to get back here in Ireland. And then for the next 7 years, I did a number of jobs from the corporate office, culminating in President of Europe. My last job with Kellogg was to help with the acquisition of Pringles from Procter & Gamble. It's been a fabulous acquisition from Kellogg. And then in 2012, I left. And since then, as you say, I've done a number of things in food and drink, which remains my passion. It's what I know, and it's what I've had the industry I've had experience in. So now I'm chair of Wicklow Wolf Craft Brewery. I've been chair of Java Republic Coffee Company. We just sold the business back 2 years ago to a fabulous new owner in Covento. I'm with Sisu, again, a startup focused in food and drink with cold pressed juice and kombucha. Super Pets, another company I'm involved with, doing vegan pet treats and doing incredibly well in that whole new area as it opens up. And then with HBAN, I help coordinate the food syndicate, and we're looking at opportunities really to invest in food and drink and growth, with growth potential, and that's been a focus of mine over the last 4 or 5 years as well.
Amazing.
So that's what's brought me to here.
And we're going to come back to all the things that you look for in sort of an investment opportunity, indeed, how our businesses can prepare to pitch to someone like yourself. So just amazing to hear. I'd not for now, but I'm sure you must have incredible stories of selling cereal in Russia. I just kind of can't imagine. I guess cereal is eaten all over the world and everyone loves Kellogg's. So I guess wherever you go, the customers are there, which is just wonderful. Beautiful. And Ray, just give us a little introduction to your business and your role.
Currently, I am the CEO of the Noledge Group. The Noledge Group are accounting software, business software distributors in the Irish and the UK marketplace. We've two companies, the Envisage Cloud Group and the Awesome Cloud Group. And they are respectively, one is a Sage business partner and the other is a NetSuite partner. It's lovely listening to Stephen and saying he's passionate about food and drink, and that's such a laudable thing. To say you're passionate about accounting software probably is the most boring statement at a dinner table. So I don't usually say that, but I generally am. I've been 30 odd years in this business, and I first started out maybe 25 years ago on my own with a company called Intellect, having acquired the Sage agency for Ireland. Quickly, Sage saw the opportunity as big as I did and moved themselves into the Irish marketplace. So I had to regrow, and I regrew the business as a company called Advent. And through acquisition and through organic growth, we grew to become again the largest business partner in Ireland. Over the last number of years, we've done a fair amount of acquisition, both in the north of Ireland and in the Irish marketplace. So we're now positioned as the largest Sage business partner. And in that interim, we also grew two businesses. One, a NetSuite business, which is an ERP application that we saw that suited maybe the upper echelon or the growth of the market, the growth companies. And we have written and have devised or implemented our own software, which is software for the retail sector, which sits between the EPOS world and the supplier world and the accounting world. And we have that installed now in 400 sites, both the UK and Ireland.
Amazing. Just two complete luminaries I have before me today, which is I feel very humbled. John Stapleton used that word earlier on today. I feel very humbled at the moment with the level of experience in the room. So Stephen, just a first question for yourself. If our businesses that are tuned in today are kind of thinking, first of all, kind of what is angel investment, but critically, when do they know the point at which they might want to apply for angel investment? So at which stage do you think businesses in the food and drink sector should be considering approaching angel investors?
I think it's at a relatively early stage, once the concept that you're bringing to market has been developed, and once you've actually proved out that concept in the market initially. So it's not right at the start of the journey, but it is relatively early into that journey. And it's at a point where the business has got some traction, ideally, in the marketplace. It's in certain geographies or it's in certain stores, and it's beginning to scale. So it's kind of proven in its early adoption and its early stages. And then it's seeking to roll forward and take the idea and scale it either locally, but ideally locally in Ireland, but ideally beyond Ireland into the UK, into Europe, Middle East, wherever, US, wherever it might have application. So that would be the ideal point in the journey. You'd want to see some proven application and some traction and some proof of concept. But equally, you'd be getting on board relatively early in the journey and seeking to work it up from there when it really does need the cash to generate either more working capital or more feet in the street for sales or for intellectual capital to help with marketing or whatever goes with the proposition.
Amazing. And give us a sense as to what you look for when you get a first approach from someone who's looking for angel investment. Is it a Word document you want? Is it a pitch deck you want? Kind of how much detail do you want when those businesses first make an approach?
I think a pitch deck is useful, and it's kind of necessary, but that's in some ways just to collect the scope of the business and to encapsulate what it is and what the idea is and what the ambition for that business is. So it's a template. It's an important template. The most important thing for me really is the opportunity to meet the promoter or the founder or the entrepreneur, because that in some ways is what you start to get behind. You back the jockey on the horse, not actually the horse itself, if I can put it in those terms. So you really want to have an opportunity to meet and greet the person who's taken the idea to marketplace and to understand what's driving them. So what's making them do this? Because this is hard work. This is a big thing to do. You've given your life to it. Why? What is it that makes this important to you? What are your values? What are you all about? And then obviously, what's your business plan look like? The pitch deck. What is the idea? What problem are you solving for? Or what is it that you're bringing to the market? How do you differentiate yourself from what's already there? What are you going to do better than your competition? Or if this is completely new, what's it all about and how you articulate that? I think you're also looking for a sense of pragmatism and realism in the pitch and the proposal, and that it's grounded in some sort of reality, because that in itself builds credibility in the early exchanges between the promoter and the possible investor. Some shot at financials, some idea of where the financials are going to land, and some thoughts about the exit, because obviously anyone who's going to invest is investing for a reason, for a return, and some indication of what that might be, and some proof of, well, in our market, we've seen this happen, and typically that's been a good exit for those that have been behind similar ideas. So just knowing that ultimately an investor is looking for a return and some idea of what that could be. And then as someone shows themselves and shows up for that engagement and walks through their pitch deck or talks through it, whatever, that person is someone who can be open to feedback, because it's early stage in the journey. And even when I think of companies like Kellogg's, who are 100 years into their journey, they're still tearing themselves apart to produce great plans for their brands. And right now they're in meeting rooms across the world doing that. So equally, as we look at something that's very new and you seek to work to perfect the proposal and to bring the next stage of the development of the concept to market, you got to be open, I think, to taking on board feedback from people that are around you, and your investors are one of those stakeholders. And can you do that? Are you big enough to be able to take that feedback, and do you welcome it, and do you see that as positive? And then it's about judge and fail. Then it all comes together and you think about it, obviously. But that's kind of how the process would work, certainly from how I would handle it. And I've seen my colleagues in HBAN adopt similar sort of getting to know you processes and using various information to help them with their decisioning.
Brilliant. And Ray, over to you, because Stephen mentions those finances, and of course it's important to see the financials. Again, as Stephen mentioned, you know, investors ultimately want a return. If a business owner is kind of listening to that and thinking, oh my goodness, where do I start when it comes to writing the finances of that business plan? Can business owners do this themselves, or do they need accountants to help? And what role does software play in sort of easing the process?
Yeah, I lean on Stephen's analogy of meeting the jockey, which is actually a good one, because while you do meet the jockey, you actually back the horse, and in the context of that, you really want to find out how many furlongs this horse can go, or how long is it depending on. So in the context of starting and running a business and getting a business and approaching people like Stephen, I think you're building up a level of trust. And what I see, and I've seen it so many times on things like the Dragon's Den, when people are presenting themselves and presenting their idea and they're passionate about the idea, and then the first finance question they get asked, they nearly stumble at the first hurdle, which is really, really sad, because there's no need to do that, because there are ample and a quantity of business software tools available in the marketplace that are quite easily able to produce sets of figures. But the key thing is that the reporting that people like Stephen need is the profitability reporting of the project, and not having those figures to hand And they're not expensive to get these days, because start-off application software is very, very inexpensive in the marketplace, particularly in the cloud scenario, by where you can download and use and begin straight away. That would be my advice to any aspiring entrepreneur. Begin straight away to manage your numbers. Productions of P&Ls and balance sheets out of these software packages are really straightforward, with a bit of advice from the chart of accounts from your accountant. But you don't necessarily need to have on board a team of accountants to grow, but you do need to know your numbers, and you do need to be able to present them to people like Stephen from the beginning, because that assures people that you have a grip on the business, not just the product. The second piece I would throw about that is, if you are looking at investing in a piece of software to help you, think about the longevity. I've seen too many times when aspiring businesses go off and they just, oh, I need account software, so I'll just download whatever I need and that'll get me off the ground. Think a bit deeper about your journey, about where you're going. You may, along that journey, have to change, if you've not done it right, change your systems 3 or 4 times. And when I go to this idea of trust, it's not only trust in terms of the financial figures that you'll be presenting, it's also trust in your product. If you're in the food sector, it's getting more and more important to have traceability, and the ability to have traceability within your application, and to be able to present the fact that you've been using or doing traceability in a food environment, so that not only can they trust you and your figures, they can trust you and your systems. And it's only on those good systems being in place. I always use the analogy of McDonald's. It may not be a big best burger, but it's one of the big best systems that has ever been introduced, and that's how they grow.
No, so true. And a question has come in since you've been talking, from Robert, who says, this is a question for both panelists. I am looking to raise angel investment, but how do I go about valuing my company to know how much equity to give away? A question we get quite a lot. Stephen, do you want to take that one first? How does Robert know how much equity to give away?
Well, I would only ever give away what equity I was comfortable in giving away. Excuse me, it is important, as you select your partners and as you take your investors on board, that you're taking the right investors and you're allowing them to enter into a business in a way, into your business in a way that you're happy with. So be careful and make sure that you've thought this through, both in terms of the money that's coming and how it's coming and what's coming with it. Choose your investors wisely is something I would counsel, because they can be of enormous help, but equally, if they're not necessarily matched to your values or your outcomes, there can be difficulties arising from that. Valuing new businesses is difficult. It is a challenge to do that, because you're not really having any past records within your accounts, as Ray would be producing for businesses who are more mature to reflect upon and drive a multiple of EBITDA or of net sales. So it is a challenge. I'd be looking at what information you can gather from similar businesses in your category that perhaps have evaluations that you can access. I'd take advice from people like those who surround the investors in HBAN. We are backed by a central team who help prepare investors, investees for meeting the investors, and they would give some guidance on what a proper valuation might be. But it is a challenge, and yeah, there's no easy answer that I can kind of reel off that can necessarily help. It's have a look around to see what the peer group, as far as you can access it, are asking for. Try and access as many industry experts, such as there are available to you, and get a feel for it. But be careful, don't overvalue it, don't undervalue it, and just be careful as to how much of it you give away whenever the time comes and who you give it away to. So approach with caution would be my biggest piece of advice, without necessarily being able to be too specific on a magic solution to business valuation of early stage businesses. That is hard.
And Ray, I mean, to you, because Stephen, as Stephen kind of says, there's no magic solution. I guess it's really tough that any company pre-profit making, so if they're not making any profit, they can't really do a multiple of EBITDA figures. So, you know, from an accounting perspective, what advice would you offer in terms of how to value a business?
Yeah, I totally get the difficulty that is there. But in terms of maybe if you don't have profits to show and you don't have, but what you do have if you are properly managing and running a business is you do have a control on the costs. You should have a knowledge of those costs. You should have a knowledge of the breakdown of the costs of the components of whatever it is that you are making. And you should understand your cost base, because while you don't have profits, you should be able to stand over those and understand, knowing those and extrapolating the sales figures or the sales potential figures. That should help you have some background and some real numbers to actually say to yourself, this business can be worth, because I know my costs. The other piece is the opportunity, and none of us can actually, you know, we're betting on that opportunity, but we're not betting on the costs. We know the costs that would exist. So having an accounting system in place that is capturing those supplier invoices for what items you are buying at the beginning helps you sit in front of investors and say where I am. That helps you understand your own value and what you bring to the table. Because generally I find people in this situation, the big thing they're missing is the opportunity piece. They can't go to the opportunity, but they should know their control on the first piece.
Nice. And Stephen, a question that's come in for you from Catherine. Catherine says, hi, Stephen, can you give an estimation of how long an angel investor can spend in each company? So I guess this is kind of maybe your, do you sit on the boards? Kind of what kind of time commitment do you give to your portfolio companies?
Hi, Catherine, that's a great question. I mean, it does depend. It depends how much time you have to give and how much help the business might need. But typically, you'd meet maybe once a month, maybe once every 2 months. And you're there really to help with giving advice or as a sounding board, or if you're more involved, if you're actually on the board of directors, there are more formal governance commitments that you've signed up to help. You don't want to be there all the time either, because you don't want to disable the founder and help. You know, you want to there to help, not to hinder and get in the way, because it's the founder who has the ownership of this business, and that is important as the investment is made, that the founder is left really well incentivized to grow the business. So that comes down again to the last question about how much investment you take on. Make sure that the founder is always in the driving seat. Because that really is, in my view, what's ideal, because that's where all the real energy and focus and drive will come from. So being available for moments that matter, more formal engagements as and when, but typically once every month, once every couple of months, maybe a bit more at the start, maybe a bit more whenever critical decisions around next stage investment or particular moves forward into new markets are being thought through. But it's not an onerous level of time that an investor would ever want to give. And again, I would very much enjoy the time that I do spend with my businesses, because it interests me. It is a passion, to Ray's point earlier. It's a passion. I enjoy it. It's what I know. And obviously, if I put skin in the game, I want that to be going forward. And I want to see the founder being successful. So it's fun to do.
I love that. I kind of, this is not implying anything about your age, by the way, but I, as a founder of a business who's very much in the day-to-day and kind of running it, I think it must be wonderful to be an angel investor, because you've been through an experience of running the ins and outs of a business day in, day out, to be able to take that slightly kind of backseat strategic view. And certainly, and we took on angel investment in 2017 as a business. And every time I go and see my angel investor, who's a brilliant man running a big PLC company, I kind of go in thinking we're doing really well. And then he kind of essentially brings me right out. And I come out every time and he's set us another stretch target. But he's able to do that, because he kind of always says, come on, think bigger, there's kind of more stuff going on. So I think it must be a wonderful position to be in, but you know, you've toiled hard to get to that position. And Ray, there's a question here for you from David. Question for Ray: do you have any suggestion of a framework to use for charting growth metrics?
Yeah, well, and thank you for the question, David. The growth metrics are different across all different business types. So in terms of tracking your growth metrics, you obviously have to be budgeting for what you're actually going to achieve. And all software packages are very capable of having budgets brought into the numbers and comparing those numbers across the actuals. So first off, having your budgets and the area of budgets of growth that you see that are important for your business, those down in numbers are very, very important. It's not aspirational is probably these days not good enough. And unless you have budgets in place, but to ask me across which ones, they vary across every industry. It could be cost control that you're looking for. It could be market penetration you're looking for. It could be margin return you're looking for. But each one of them are calculable with modern software.
Brilliant. And a question for Stephen. Stephen, this one is from Jasmine. So she says, hi, Stephen, I have more of a food tech business. Do you invest in product-based businesses, or are you also looking at technology solutions?
The HBAN group would be looking at all manner of food-based opportunities, whether it's tech or whether it's the brand level or food service. I think each opportunity would be interesting, and then it depends on the particulars of that. So it's certainly no barrier to be in food tech to come seek an investment from HBAN. It's down to the quality of the promoter and the idea and the plan.
And just on that, across HBAN, so I know that HBAN sort of invests in lots of different sectors. Is food and drink one of the bigger sectors that HBAN delivers on? HBAN
have 15 syndicates actually in Ireland, and we've actually now got syndicates in London and one in Singapore, I believe. But within the island of Ireland, there'd be split across geographics. There'd be some in the southwest, the south, the west, and what have you, and then across different industry sectors. So food and drink would be one of the bigger industry sectors that HBAN would have of the 15 syndicates they have, both geographically and sector specific.
Brilliant. And sorry, I'm just going to try and get these couple more questions in. Ray, one for you from Sean, who says, do you have any advice on where I can go to look for a good accountant?
Accountant. I would have said the local hostelry if things are open. I think, in fairness, you need to do a little bit of research in that particular context. There are certain firms and there are certain practices that are suitable for certain industries, and they specialize in those industries. But invariably, if you startup people, usually it's a trusted advisor, so somebody who you trust in the early part. Because in the early part, the most important thing is having a chart of accounts and having them filled with numbers. So somebody who will guide you to make sure that you're capturing the right pieces at the beginning. It doesn't necessarily have to be one of the big five. It doesn't necessarily have to be the smallest guy in the town, but somebody who you think has, if it was obviously in the agri or the food sector, the local accountant in the local town would have an experience of farm or experience of small production, and that guy is very, very important to you if he has that bit of experience. As you grow, that's a different kettle of fish, but to start you off, somebody who's familiar with the environment that you're in. But there's nowhere where you can specifically go other than Google the accountants firms in your area, and then Google or go to their websites and see what their experience is.
Brilliant. And just a final question for Stephen. I'm going to take this one from Dan, who says, again, I'm looking for angel investment. Stephen, can you give me any indication as to how long angel investors stay in their investments? By this, I mean, when do you want your exit?
At the best possible time, it says the stock answer to that, Dan. And typically that is going to be a 5-year minimum situation because the business is at early stage. Food and drink does take some time to scale up, given the nature of what it is and the industry specifics. So it's minimum 5 years. And then once you get beyond the 5-year timeline, it's looking for the best time to maximize the return, or at the best time for the business to move on to perhaps other investors or to bring new capital on board. But the conversations will start to get a bit more intentional after about 5 years, typically. Again, no absolute rule of thumb, but in terms of my perspective, that's kind of the timeline I would have. And having investors on board that are patient, who are loyal, who want to come back, and as the business scales and perhaps needs more finance, are going to be there whenever those moments come, is important as well. So just remember, it's not necessarily a one-time event. The angel investment, there may be different stages where investment's required as the business scales up. So again, that's another good reason to be careful who you choose as your investors. And I know that's a luxury sometimes for new businesses, and you're taking whatever sources of finance you can reach, but it's just important to try and do the best you possibly can in that selection process. It is a two-way thing.
I was always told never do a deal when you're tired.
Good advice.
Which I think is great advice. Certainly don't rush into it. Amazing. Ray and Stephen, that was superb. It felt really quick actually in terms of timing, but we packed in a lot of helpful advice and we got through a decent number of questions. So huge thanks for your help on that. Ray will share information on the Sage accounting package, because I know it's a brilliant service that businesses can use, as you say, to kind of get their finances in order and manage their money. And Stephen, if you're happy, we'd love to share details of HBAN
Sure.
for those businesses that are looking to raise angel investment. So thank you both so very much for your time and your expertise today.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here. Enjoyed it a lot.
Very much.